Good evening, everybody. My name is Daphne, and I'm very honored to be presenting on the last session of this very interesting festival. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to cut many of the sessions because of a pretty tight schedule, but I have a very juicy, calm evening for the next hour and a half prepared for you. And just some housekeeping before we begin properly is that I'd like you to type in the chat box if there are any questions that you have, or please feel free to unmute yourself if there is anything that you would like to share, or if there is any issues that you are experiencing. Okay, and also that for the session, this is an experiential session, so you would need a yoga mat, but don't worry if you don't have a yoga mat. It's perfectly fine if you have a clean floor, a wooden floor, or a ceramic floor. As if you have a clean floor, you can lay on the floor to do the practice, or if you have a very firm bed to do the practice, you can also do it on your bed. I would like you to also have a blanket or a bath towel. So a blanket or a bath towel, it doesn't have to be a blanket if you don't have one, but if you have a big bath towel, that would be very useful to do. And let me see, is there any other things? Okay, that's pretty much it. So my name is Daphne, and I am from Singapore. I am a yoga therapist, a somatic educator, as well as a body worker. So for the last 12 years, I have been experimenting with the body and with how the mind and the body is intricately connected in what is now called the field of somatics. And I will get more into what somatics is about as we begin the session. But tonight we're actually going to talk about trauma. And Martha told me that, oh, people want to know more about trauma because it's not something that's often talked about. Even though I feel like in the community that I'm with, it seems to be the buzzword actually, trauma. Everything is about trauma. So actually, I'd like you to share with me, perhaps type in the chat box, what do you know about trauma, or what do you think trauma is? If you'd like to unmute yourself and just share in voice, you're also welcome to do that. Can I open this up to the people in this session? What is the trauma? Stress to the body. Good. What else? Anyone else? Anything unwanted? Stress to the mind. Okay. What is trauma? What is it? Violation. Cool. Violation of a disturbing experience. Repeated violation of will. It's something that causes you to relive something unwanted whenever you get triggered. A negative experience that haunts you and affects your life. So who thinks that trauma is a one-off experience? Does anyone think so? No. Okay. Cool. Great. So I'm going to share screen to give you a little bit of an introduction of what we are going to be getting into today. Okay, can everybody see this pretty well? Great. Okay. Right. So, has anyone ever heard of somatics? or the field of somatics. So in somatics, we are working on the premise that the mind and the body is one and the same. There is no separate things, and they are not separate entity. I think in our very linear society, in our very cognitive world, we tend to kind of think that the mind is just living in our head and the body is separate. But in somatics, we actually acknowledge that the mind and the body are actually one and the same. So I love this quote from one of my favorite teachers. Her name is Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. She's the founder of Body Mind Centering. It's a school based in the US. She said that the mind is like the wind and the body is like the sand. If you want to know how the wind is blowing, you can look at the sand. I repeat that again. The mind is like the wind and the body is like the sand. If you want to know how the wind is blowing, you can look at the sand. And I love the way she just says it all in this 2 sentences, that we are, the mind and the body, we are one and the same. So our body is actually reflecting our state of being, our state of mind. So the word soma, somatics comes from the word soma, and it is from a Greek origin which translates to the living body, which is the essence, our essence of life, our life force. And it is the cosmic biological intelligence to self-organize, self-regulate through our relational being. And this relational being is our body-mind. And it starts to become relational the moment that we are conceived, when life is injected into us. And in somatics, we inquire into this soma to explore relationships between the microcosm, which is within us, and the macrocosm, which is the environment in which we inhabit through. So through processes and looking at the different systems in the body, we create a self-image that is not something that we look in the mirror, not something that we try to project towards other people, and it's not something that we think that somebody wants us to be. So we come back to this first order reality, this truth that we embody, which is our cellular being, which is how we are presenting and unraveling ourselves in every moment. And this, in somatics, it calls forth our curiosity to sense and to feel and to be guided through what is arising from moment to moment. This is called the bottom-up approach, as opposed to top-down approach. In a way, it's a very feminine central approach and very counter to our current state of busy life, which is very patriarchal. I think in our modern society, we're often told to think first before we act. Whereas this approach, the somatic approach, is asking us to sense, to feel, to organize, to act. Instead of thinking first, acting, and then feeling, and then deciding whether we like it or don't like it. And by the time, many times when that is done, we actually kind of like, this is not really who I am. This is not really what I want. This is not really the essence of my being. So in somatic principles, we really look at the body, we inquire into the body, we work with the body to improve the awareness of the body-mind connection. It is a sensory approach, which I have mentioned, and rather than a cognitive approach. So we learn, we unlearn, we relearn. And it is very much exploratory in nature, based on the premise that the body is shaped by the mind, and that the mind can be reshaped through the body, and that behaviors and habits and patterns can be changed and transformed. It is focused on the internal experience of the movement rather than the end result. So it's not goal-oriented, but process-oriented. So what is trauma? I am rephrasing this quote, the first sentence that I have listed in the presentation here from Dr. Gabriel Marte. I'm a big fan of his studies and his work. Um, I watched one of his presentations. He said something to this essence, probably not verbatim, but he said that trauma is not just about what happened to us, but what happened within us. So very close to, very much the essence of all of what you have all shared earlier. Is a violation. It is something disturbing. It may not just be one incident. There are many triggers that can re-traumatize or reenact the incident or the incidents. Um, so trauma is often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate with emotions with that experience. And complex post-traumatic stress disorder, often called CPTSD, is a proposed psychological disorder that can develop in response to prolonged, repeated experience of interpersonal trauma in a context in which the individual has little or no chance of escape. Meaning that we often talk about the nervous system as, stress response as in fight or flight. When there are choices being presented to us, we are actually able to choose whether to fight it or to run away from it. These are choices. These are still choices within our volition. When these choices are taken away from us, then we get into a state of disassociation or or we're frozen. So trauma happens when we don't have the choice, when that choice has been taken away from us. And that event itself we can consider that as trauma, but then whether our body can discharge it, whether we can process it, is that what the processes that is going to happen within us. And what is going to happen within us is that going to shape our belief system and our behavioral patterns. And through these processes and through prolonged time, it becomes, in a way, it kind of shapes our world and our reality. So in psychology, we often talk about the first order reality and the second or third order reality. First order reality is, for example, this is a pen. This is a black pen. It is a pen that I'm going to write on a piece of paper. But then second order reality comes in, whereby this is a pen, well, the ink, I'm not sure if I like the ink. Oh, this is not a very good pen, I don't like the brand. Oh, there's another brand who's better. You start to create storylines around it. So then it's no longer the first order reality. So let's look at the nervous system a little bit more. This is a very, very simplified a depiction of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, very often lumped together and called the autonomic nervous system. It's called the autonomic nervous system in the sense that, the body functions, so these processes are happening on its own without us, very often without us even being conscious of it, without us even noticing what is going on. Very often when I ask people, please breathe out, like take an exhale. But what happens is the person goes, it's almost like you've forgotten that you are actually breathing. So our heartbeat is constantly regulating our life. If our heart stops beating, we're not living and breathing anymore. Our lungs are processing the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Our diaphragm is moving in order for the lungs to expand and contract. Our blood is flowing. The lymphatic system is moving. Our cerebrospinal fluid is moving. Our liver, our spleen, our digestive organs, all these functions are actually happening without us being conscious of it. So because these processes are so much in our subconscious, they are autonomic, that we don't actually pay attention to them, does not mean that they are not there. They are very much there. So and again, when we look at the body, we cannot actually forget the mind. But when we look at the mind, we have to look at the body. So how is the mind and the body connected? Through the nervous system. So the picture on your left depicts the parasympathetic nervous system. And on the brain stem, there is a specific nerve called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is innervated into every single one of our organs, of our internal organs. And it ends in the sacral area. So it's very much governing the homeostasis, or the balance, the rhythm, the motility of all our organs. And when we are able to rest and digest and relax and be in the present, can these organs be functioned in optimum state? On the right hand side is the sympathetic nerve that is also innervated in the nervous into the organs. But the sympathetic nerve is in the spinal cord itself, in the spinal column itself. So when we are in the sympathetic complex, these nerves tells the organs to stop working, because what is more important is to run, or to fight, or to freeze. Okay, it's a very simplified, abridged version of explaining the nervous system. If you'd like to find out more, please feel free to get in touch with me, and we can definitely chat more on this topic. So going to what are the symptoms of undischarged traumatic stress. So trauma can happen as we move through life. So if you look at this diagram, the graph or the line, and the green line itself talks about how we move through our day-to-day life. We actually require to be both in the sympathetic complex as well as in the parasympathetic complex, because we need to wake up in the morning and go to work and be a mother and be a sister and be a partner, be a wife, be a husband, do all the things that we need to do to move through life. And the sympathetic nervous system helps us, or propels us to complete these tasks. In fact, the very fact that you know what time it is to get on this call, to come onto this workshop, and me presenting this, we are in the sympathetic zone. So sympathetic zone is required for us to move through life. Being in the sympathetic zone does not mean that we are often in a stress response. It does not mean that we're often just in fight or flight. It just means that we are functioning out of our volition. Okay, so don't mix there's often a misconception that sympathetic means that we're stressed, means that it's fight or flight, and parasympathetic means that it's rest or digest. It's not really that. It's actually a mix of how our body is working with our brain, that interplay between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic that helps us kind of, our body chooses which state we are in, whether we are in a normal functioning state, going between sympathetic and parasympathetic, knowing when do we need to act out of volition and when we can rest, when can we relax, when can we be on, when can we be off. But then when the traumatic events happen, there is then a disruption. So you get over aroused, there's a high arousal, and gets into overwhelmed state, and then you get so tired you shut down. So you kind of go between this jarring state of on and off and on and off and on and off. And in complex trauma, whereby the trauma happens over time, happens a lot with childhood trauma when there's domestic violence, or sexual trauma when you have a violent partner, or any form of other long-term abuse, you can be stuck either on the on state of constantly being triggered, constantly in the stress response of wanting to fight it or wanting to run away from it, which creates symptoms like anxiety, panic, hypervigilance, exaggerated behavior, this inability to relax and constantly restless. The mind doesn't stop. You're constantly wanting to jump out of your skin, and your digestion is pretty shitty, pun intended. And there's a lot of rage that cannot really be processed. There's this constant need to just be in this bracing mode. But then our body cannot sustain us being in this mode. So eventually it will collapse and it will shut down. So then when it comes down, we can also be stuck in an off mode for a very long time. And this is when depression happens, numbness happens, disassociation, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, you become disorientated. There can also be just this blank look on your face and almost this inability to actually want to breathe because there is a loss in the will to live. So in somatic work, we actually look at the framework, which is what I'm sharing with you now in a very abridged version, called the polyvagal framework, which looks at how the vagus nerve is functioning within the internal body system. And through this framework, we learn to identify and recognize which state the client's body, or as a therapist, the therapist's state of mind is in, and then we work with that. Okay. So how do we work with that is through understanding and labeling emotions. So for example, to not identify with something, we actually label it to create a relationship and a distance with it. To become aware of emotional state through the difference between sensing, feeling, and being. So sensing is a sympathetic behavior. Sensing is a sympathetic action of taking our brain, our mind, our nervous system to go into certain body parts to investigate what is going on there. And then feeling then is the feedback that we are getting from that part of the body. And then comes the choice as to what does that inform us? How do we then decide who can we be and how can we act? As I mentioned, this is a bottom-up approach. So it is not about the what, but about the how. Because the sensory feedback provides the input for proprioception. Proprioception it means where the body is in space. So knowing how we orientate ourselves, knowing how to land and locate. Often in a state of trauma, we forget where we are. We don't know where is up, where is down, where is left, where is right, which is constantly in either, like what I was mentioning earlier, either we are hypervigilant, so where our body is actually really off the ground, or we are in a collapse state whereby gravity, we become just completely surrendered to gravity that we don't even know how to pick ourselves back up again. So we engage the limbic system. Limbic system is the part of our brain that regulates fear, and the somatosensory pathway, which is the brainstem, work to regulate the nervous system. And so feelings and attitudes are influenced by where we are, the kind of environment that we're in, the state of our being. So our movement, our posture, how our body is contracting or releasing. We can use that to actually assess and regulate our feeling and attitude. Okay. So this is the framework in which I work with. It's called movement, inquiry, and embodiment. So we cultivate inquiry into how we inhabit within ourselves and learn to how to truly listen, listening to our body without judgment. And then and how learning how do we then recognize and identify how we are relating, how we are reacting, how we're responding. And then how do we express this through movement, through our embodied being? So how are our cells talking to us? And then so we then learn who we are, we learn why we are, what we are, and when we are. So this is a deep dive into the essence of our being, into our soma, which is just more than being a human doing. Very often we call ourselves a human being, but we're just oftentimes we're human doings, we're not human beings. Okay, and this is a quest to seeing how we are deeply connected in this intricate flow of life, and that life happens, many things happen in this incarnation. So where does reality begin and where does it end? Okay, so this is another quote that I like to share with you. Is by Viktor Frankl. He spent a lot of years in the concentration camp, and many times people. His wife was in concentration camp, but separated from him. His children were, and but he became a great philosopher and great thinker. And this is what he shared. One of the quotes from his book. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom." So, coming back to the theme of our experiential practice this evening is the fluid body. So why do I call it the fluid body? Because the body, if we look at the core or the beginning of all life forms on planet Earth, all life forms begin in the water, in fluids. The very first organism that formed on planet Earth is actually a single cell organism called the amoeba. And then through that come multicellular beings, and then we keep organizing and evolving and developing into from the water we come onto the land. And then from the land we started with the reptilian and then the mammalian. So human beings as a biped, a mammalian species that walks on 2 feet, actually a very highly evolved form of organism. That's why we actually forget that we come from fluids, and that within us, that 66% of our body, depending on our age and our health, is still very much made up of fluids. So this quote from another yoga teacher called T.S. Little, he said, "The body's essential nature is fluid, and the prana, which is the life force, flows like a tide. In the body, the fluids move in wave-like movements in the blood, lymph, and cerebrospinal fluid. And through practice, we can begin to sensing these tides, supporting their rhythms and absorbing into the fluid body. And this leads to states of sublime awareness and meditative flow, as the sequence we practice will be deeply nourishing." So before we begin the practice, I'd just like to share a few images of some nature landscape. And these images are courtesy of my friend Peter Els. He's an Australian Greek photographer. And during 1 year, there was a lot of rain in southern Australia, and he captured these stunning images in southern Australia at a place called Lake Eyre. It was actually a desert that became overflowed because of the rain and the flooding, and life form begins to form. So I'm just sharing a couple of images, and I'm going to let you, actually invite you to just tap into your body's sensation as we move through these images, okay? So maybe you like to just notice your breath, notice how you are sitting, whether you're seated on a chair or on the floor. Begin to really allow your awareness to hold both what is within and what is without through these images. So actually this picture is in the Blue Mountains, and that's me standing in the stream. And my teacher often say that, if we just recognize that we are an organism, that we are part of something that is greater, that what's within us is also a universe, and that fluids, there's our fluids within us is just flowing within those nooks and crannies. The trees are like our lungs, the rocks are like our bones. And even if you look into a rock, there it is actually porous. Yes, it is actually porous, and our bones are actually porous. And within our bones are the marrows and flows, which is also very, very much dense fluids. And what if the sand and the soil, or if they are our connective tissue, it's what holds us together. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. I'm going to see, how do I do that? I don't know. How am I going to stop share? How do I stop share?
Go to the view options,
Okay. Yes.
yeah.
All right. Is there any question or anything you'd like to share at this point before we start the practice? Anyone? I've been to Lake Eyre. Oh, nice. Sometimes people do freeze during a situation instead of having a fight or flight response, correct? Yes, because it actually bypasses the fight or flight. It goes straight into freeze when there is no choice. The practice is not, I don't want to call it a trauma release practice. It's more of a coming back into our body, a relating back into our body, just to just come back into it again. Because in trauma, when we've experienced trauma, when we've experienced violation, as some of you have called it, we actually become disembodied. There are many areas that we don't really want to get there. So this is just actually a really, really simple practice. It's very safe. It's very calming. And in fact, I hope you won't fall asleep. But it's really just coming back to relating to ourselves. Yes, let's see. Yeah. If you'd like to chat more after this, please contact me. Are we ready? Yes? Give me a thumbs up if you are. So practice through this increased awareness. It's like meditation. Yes. Is that okay? We're good? Okay. So actually, if I'd like to invite, if you all can hear me, are you able to hear me if you're not near the computer? Yes? Good. Okay. So I'm going to guide you through while sitting here. But for the first part of the practice, I actually like you to stand up and just take a walk about and listen to my cues, if that's all right. Okay? So I can't see all of you, but I would like you to just get off your chair for now, yeah, and stand up. Take a moment to just have a little walk around. Walk around your room. I know you might have been in your room for like the whole day. Today you might know your room inside out. But perhaps rediscover your room with new eyes, with a sense of curiosity. And begin to just hold an awareness of your body at the same time. So, how is your body navigating through this space, through the space of your room? What are you looking at? Where is your eye line? So, are you looking up? Are you tending to look down? How tired are you at the moment? Thank you, Danny. So, what is holding your head? How much effort there is in holding the weight of your head? You know, our head actually weighs 5 to 6 kilos. It's quite significant. So, how are you holding your head? Are you holding your head through gripping your throat? Are you holding your head through tensing your jaw or your eyes? Are you holding your head by tensing your spine or lifting your shoulders? And where is your breath at the moment? Just notice, is your breath short or shallow? Is it in the chest, in the belly? How are you contacting the ground? Can you feel gravity? What happens when you heel strike the next step you take? What happens when your heel strikes the floor? And what happens when your toes lift off the ground? What can you notice? What can you observe? And notice if your shoulders are moving with your stride, or are they rigid? Notice if you're holding your arms in a braced position. Notice if you want to be in this room doing this practice. Notice how is the light streaming through in your room. Are you happy with the lighting? How does your nervous system process the lighting in your room? The temperature in your room? The sound of my voice? Any other sounds that are coming through? Notice if there's any smells. What's the taste in your mouth at this point? And then if you're tired of walking, perhaps just come to standing. Still be on your 2 feet. Take a moment to find your stance. And if you practice yoga, you might be familiar with the mountain pose. If you don't practice yoga, don't worry about what the mountain pose is. Just stand on 2 feet where you can find a position, a posture of standing that is actually sustainable, meaning that you actually feel quite comfortable standing. Okay. And then begin to notice, how are you touching the ground? How is the ground receiving you? Sense into the 2 feet and notice, how is each foot touching the ground differently? Does one side of your foot feels heavier or touches the ground more than the other? Notice if you're locking your knees. Notice if you're pushing your pelvis forward or backwards. Notice if there's any tension in your lower back, your middle back, or your upper back. Notice if one shoulder is higher than the other. And if you have your eyes closed or open, just notice. What happens if you have your eyes closed if they were open? And what happens to your nervous system if your eyes were open and you closed them? Is there any tensing in your jaw? Where is the position of your tongue? How relaxed are your eyes? And then just let it all go. Just take a mental break for now. Come back to your breath. And have your eyes closed for a moment here. And hold a mental image of your body in this room, in the room that you're in. Just notice if you can still remember where you are. Where are the walls? How far are the walls from you? Where are the windows? Where is the door? How high is the ceiling from your head? Where is the light coming from? And picture this in your mind. And then when you're ready, slowly blink open your eyes. Look around you. And just notice if anything is as you imagine or is not as you imagined. Okay. And then come down to the floor, to your yoga mat. Or, if, like I said, it can also just be a floor. Or a firm bed, if you have a really firm bed. I can't see you, so I'm not sure if you are ready. If you, it's no problem if you don't want to turn the camera on, but if you like to just share this moment together, this practice together, feel free to. It's a very safe practice. So if you have a blanket or a towel, I'd like you to make a little burrito roll. So what we're going to do now is just to roll the blanket into a tight opia or burrito. Okay. This. And I'm going to create some mental image for you. We're going to do some pelvic work. Okay. So there are 2 points in the hips here. It's called the hip points, often referred to as the hip points. So maybe take your hands and touch these 2 bony protrusions here. Okay, to identify them. And this is the right side of your hip point is going to be 3 o'clock. The left side of your hip point is going to be 9 o'clock. Okay, and then find your belly button, and that's going to be 6 o'clock. And your pubic bone is going to be 12 o'clock. Okay, so you have 12 o'clock, which is your pubic bone, the right side of your hip point, which is going to be 3 o'clock. The belly button is going to be 6 o'clock. The left side of your hip point is 9 o'clock. And then you have 12 o'clock again. Okay. And then I'm going to invite you to lie down without the blanket. With your feet hip width apart to start with. Okay. Arms alongside the body. Take a moment to settle, make yourself comfortable. Make any necessary adjustment that is required to be maybe 2% more comfortable, 3% more comfortable. So notice where, if there is anywhere you might be bracing or holding. Perhaps if you feel that you are tensing in your belly, maybe walk your feet a little bit closer. If there is any tension in the pelvic area, maybe let the feet widen a little bit. And I'd like you to just allow the body to settle into gravity. Feel how gravity is receiving the weight of your body. And then begin to just let what has transpired during the day, allow that to wash over you with some more intentional breath. So allowing the breath to be a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. Switching gears from the thinking mind really into the feeling body now. Notice the spaces in between your back body and the floor. Where are there spaces? In which part of the body does it touch the ground? So perhaps there is spaces underneath the feet in the arches of your feet. Perhaps there's spaces underneath your lower back. Maybe there's spaces between your shoulder blades in the back of your heart. There's a space underneath your neck. There's space underneath your knees, space underneath your arms. And notice those areas where it's touching the ground is actually in contact with the ground. Where is your weight? And there are some hazards to this kind of practice is that fatigue can set in, especially if you if you have been quite busy and your nervous system has been in overdrive. So the moment that we start to relax, we become really tired. So if that is what your body is calling for you to rest, and if you drift off, you drift off. That's totally okay. Yeah. The other hazard is the opposite, that you're stuck on arm. So you might feel like you are jumping out of your skin. You don't really want to be here. Why am I doing this? My mind can't stop racing. Perhaps acknowledge that as well. And if you need to move, please move. So just check in with your state of mind. Are you able to stay in a relaxed but alert state? Now, I'd like you to begin to breathe a little bit more intentionally once again. So when I say intentional breath, it doesn't mean forceful breath. I'd just like you to sense into your breath a little bit more. So notice your breath a little bit more. And perhaps bring in the images of a natural landscape, maybe your favorite nature place, or maybe an image that I showed you earlier. And begin to just tap into this natural rhythm of life force within you. Notice how, as you inhale, maybe you can feel that your spine starts to extend a little bit more. The pelvis might get a little bit lighter. And then as you breathe out, there might be a little bit more contact with the floor through the spine and the pelvis. Now, if you were to superimpose the image of the pelvic clock with the rhythm of your breath, perhaps you can sense the breath moving between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Just notice the breath moving between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So as you inhale, let the breath move through the body. Perhaps sense a wave-like ripple through the fluid spine, moving through the spine. If the spine connects the pelvis to the rib cage, to the head, how does the breath change the weight of your body? And once you're able to connect with the rhythm of your breath, begin to also sense into 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. So when you breathe in, there's the space between 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock become a little bit wider, or not at all. Maybe you don't feel anything, maybe it doesn't move, and that's also okay. And when you breathe out, what happens to 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock? And once you can tap into this rhythm, perhaps sense into the whole pelvic clock, the whole clock phase. As you breathe in, there's the clock phase, the whole clock expand. And as you breathe out, there's the clock condense. Sense into this pulsation of rhythm within the body. And from within, sense into how you are relating to the ground beneath you and the space around you. Let's take 3 more cycles of inhalation and exhalation. Notice if your attention can stay for 3 full cycles of breath, or is it drifting away? And then the next time you exhale, just let it go, rest your brain, rest your body. If you like to, you can slide your legs straight. And find a new organization of your body with your legs straight. Or you can stay in this position if you're comfortable. You can have your legs straight. Notice how is it different? How is your body organized differently? How does gravity receive you differently with your legs straight as compared to with your legs bent? Then when you're ready, bend your knees again. And this time, take the burrito. Lift your pelvis up and place the burrito underneath your pelvis. Okay. If this is pain, if this triggers any pain or any discomfort, then don't do it. You can also do the exercise without the blanket. But if possible, bring the blanket underneath your pelvis. So here I'd like you to check that you have a neutral pelvis, which means that you're not in an arch, okay? This is not very sustainable for your spine. And if you're in an arch, you need to move the blanket roll a little bit lower. And also check that you're not in a tuck. If you're in a tuck, you can feel like 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock are too close together. They're kind of crunched out and you're in a tuck. So if you're in a tuck position, move the burrito roll a little bit higher. So you want to find the center of the back of your sacrum. So the center of your pelvis on the back side. Okay? So that your pelvis is still in a neutral position.
Then just take a moment here to settle and rest. Come back to your breath again. Notice if the breath is moving your spine and your pelvis differently. And then we're going to begin with some pelvic rock. Okay. So bring the clock face back, project that onto the lower belly, the lower abdomen, and then begin to rock from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And perhaps sync it with your breath as you inhale, come into a little arch rock towards 12 o'clock. And as you exhale, come into a little tuck and rock towards 6 o'clock. Just rocking back and forth, following your breath. And notice how much can you do this movement with ease and support. So you want as much ease as possible. If there is any point that you feel discomfort or pain, perhaps back off a little or rest. So honor whatever sensations is arising. And then step 2, become curious of how this undulation of your pelvis moves through or ripples through the whole body. See if you can find fluidity in your movement through the fluidity of your spine, the fluidity of your breath. So you're just unwinding, letting the fluids flush through the whole body system. Let's do 3 more cycles of breath here. And then the next time you exhale, come back to neutral position. Notice your breath now. And the breath itself, even if you don't move, has a sense of dynamic stillness as the order of nature. Nature propels life. And then when you're ready, find 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock between the right side of your hip point and the left side of your hip point, and begin to just rock your pelvis from 3 to 9. So you're doing basically a little pelvic rotation here, rotating the pelvis to the right and to the left. And see if you can allow fluidity in the groin area, just where the hip crease is. So try not to lock your hips or your legs. And just allow this movement to also ripple through the whole body. So perhaps when you rock to one side, you can feel the side of the pelvis becoming heavier and the other side becoming lighter. What happens to your breath? See if you can find a relationship of this undulation of the spine moving through the pelvis all the way to your head, from the head all the way to your feet. Notice how each part of the body is contacting the floor of the blanket. How do you stay supported and still find ease in movement? Just moving 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And maybe if you are starting to get into the rhythm of this movement, the head might turn either in the same direction as your knees because of the movement of your spine, or maybe your head is turning in the opposite direction of your knees and doing a whole body unwinding. Notice your breath here. I'm not asking you to sync it with your breath anymore, but can your breath still follow? Or can your breath still guide the movement? Let's move through 2 more cycles on each side. Feel how the burrito or the blanket is providing feedback on the shape of your pelvis, especially the back of the pelvis. We don't really look at, or we do look at the back of the pelvis, but through another lens this time, through the lens of touch. And sensual touch. Sensuality is basically the essence of embodiment. Is the essence of being whole. Come back to the center when you're ready. And again, once again, take a pause. Notice your breath. Take stock of your state of being at this point. And then we're going to do a rock around the clock. And you're going to go clockwise. So find 12 o'clock. And then rock over to 3. And then to 6. To 9. And then back to 12. Go around again. See if you can really slow things down here as you become more curious. And maybe a little bit more adventurous on what you are uncovering here. Sensations, emotions, feelings, certain posture, certain movement might bring about certain emotions. What happens if we just witness and allow, or pause and hold and release? Notice if there's any other sensations that are underneath the tone. So we often listen to the screams, we often listen to pain and discomfort. Can we go under the screams and listen to the whispers too? What else is showing up here? And if you're comfortable moving in a clockwise position or direction, try counterclockwise. What happens now if you move from 12 to 9 to 6 to 3 and then back to 12? Maybe it's a little bit more unfamiliar. It's something that is out of your habitual narrative. What can you uncover here? Is there more or less fluidity in the movement? Can you still sense the fluidity through the rhythm of your breath, the tidal flow of your fluids? Rising, receding, expanding, condensing. And if you start to become more comfortable to this movement, perhaps look at those other places around the clock. Find 2 o'clock, between 12 and 3. You can also find 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 4 o'clock. How else can you articulate this very vulnerable area in your body? And vulnerability, in a way, is courage. It's courage to be seen, to be witnessed, to come into relationship with. And we find that courage when we know that we have support. Support from something that is greater than us, in this case, gravity and space. And just take the next 2 minutes or so to either rest or move in any other ways that you might want to, any other juicy ways. If you like to also let your arms come into the picture, you can reach the arms towards the sky. You can let your arms stretch over your head. How else can you express this instrument or this vessel, which is your body? How can you come into relationship with this incarnation that is going to see you through your life? How can you ride the waves of your breath, the flow of fluids from within? And what are the images that are flashing before you? Are you able to label the emotions that is washing over you? If you like to even explore, perhaps you want to slide one leg straight away from you or lift a leg up towards the sky, or let your legs be free and explore the space. How else can you co-create with the support of gravity, with the container of space? How else can you shape shift and adapt and undulate? And then begin to allow your body to slow down, and come back into a space of dynamic stillness. Noticing the breath, the quality of breath, the quality of being. And then perhaps, if you like to, you can lift up your buttocks and remove the burrito roll from underneath your pelvis, and let your pelvis settle back onto the floor, onto the ground. Take a moment to
sense this new point of contact, which is the floor against your pelvis, supporting your pelvis. And if you like to slide your legs straight, to come into full connection with the ground, or you can still stay with your feet on the floor. Just take a moment for your nervous system, the mind body to integrate this experience. When you're ready, perhaps just roll your head side to side. Stretch any way you like to. And then find your way onto your side. So you curl into a fetal position. So into a flexion, into this embrace within yourself. Okay, and then rise into sitting, come back into a vertical relationship with gravity when you're ready. If you like to still keep your eyes soft or closed, notice how from a horizontal relationship coming back into vertical, back into sympathetic, back into engagement with the world around you, with the environment, with your volition. Can you still stay within, hold the two opposing view of being aware of what's within and what's without? Okay, and I'd like you to just open your eyes. Is it possible for us to do a quick sharing before we finish? If there's anything you'd like to share. I don't know why. Is there anything you'd like to share? You can type it in the box so you can unmute yourself. I would love to hear someone if that's okay. That would be great if somebody can speak. So I know I've not been just talking to a screen the last hour and a half.
Thank you, Daphne. I feel so sleepy now. My eyes don't want to open up.
Yes. So somatic practices is very much, it really helps to to switch gears into the parasympathetic rest and relax, rest and digest system, so that when we tap into what our organs and our body has this innate intelligence to self-organize and self-regulate, to know that, okay, we need to rest, we need to digest, we need to reset. So often this is a nervous system reset, which is why I love this work so much. So in the retreats, I used to do a lot of retreats pre-COVID. So some of the retreats are 2 weeks long, and then in the beginning you will see participants they're really, really tired because everyone comes from a busy life, and so the nervous system is talking back to them to rest, 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 rest. So it's not uncommon that people fall asleep or get really, really tired, or so relaxed that they don't really want to leave the ground. But then as the time progresses, as we get more in tune with our body, we are able to then get into the state of being able to be relaxed and be alert. So this is in polyvagal theory, this is the ventral vagal tone, whereby we're able to socially engage and be present for each other with the external environment while still being able to stay connected within.
Wow, I feel so light. So I'm like floating.
Anyone else like to share?
I do want to share. I
Hello,
don't know.
Steve.
Hello. Actually, after the meditation, it kind of made me feel relaxed. Like, especially like I did mention a while ago that I've been on and off. It's just a roller coaster, and it's just this one kind of just for some reason I feel way relaxed. Because like I'm so used to like feeling my breath or my breathing like shorten, or even sometimes I just feel like sleepy all the time. Now I kind of feel more energized a little,
Yeah.
and then I'm also feeling like I just realized, because sometimes I would feel like I would be like sitting, just like a while ago while you were talking. I could feel like I wasn't even breathing. I would catch myself. I'm like, oh, oh. And I was like, just doing this. That's why I kind of like removed my my video. I was like, what? Now like I kind of started feeling my body like, oh yeah, I'm breathing. I could definitely see that.
Yeah. So this work is also very much working with our subconscious and bringing what's unconscious to us becoming conscious, so that it really it's kind of like tells us, remind us to, hey, be more in tune, be more present, be more embodied, and that our subconscious actually drives most of our behavior. We think that we control everything. We don't. So if we are tapping into our subconscious, that is our intuition, um, we are actually acquiring our sixth sense, our superpower.
I do agree with that, especially like because I've been going through therapy for the past few years. Knowing that like I that just recently confirmed that I do have PTSD, I was like telling myself like I need to constantly fight this one too. So now it makes sense, and just I've done a lot of coping mechanisms already. Like I've like made it a habit now, and just this one does really tune you in with yourself.
Yes.
And because like my mind would be constantly drifting to certain things, I would be like sometimes unconsciously triggering myself, and I'm like, dang it, like I don't need this. I don't need this right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I have to also defend myself from myself, like, no, 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 that's not true. And sometimes it'd be like, kind of true. And it just, like, this one really helps. And
Yeah, great. I'm so
thank
glad
you.
to hear that. Yes, so I know that a lot of trauma work is very much CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy work, so which is more talk therapy, which is using talking is still very much a top-down approach, as in using the mind to get out of the mind. So this is a bottom-up approach, as I was mentioning, in which we get into the body to reorganize the mind, to actually, hey, to feel safe. When we feel safe within our body, that is really kind of like the basic foundation. This, because we have this body. This is the only thing we have. We have this body, and if we don't feel safe in this body, how can we navigate through life? So this practice is really taking us back into how can we find safety within ourselves? How can we trust our body again? I think finding trust in our body is actually something that we forget. Yeah, because especially now when everything is online, everything is more about what we see. We trust our eyes, and our eyes is so close to our frontal lobe, our executive functioning, and we think that everything is our volition, everything we can control, everything is where we click or we swipe. But how do we just come back to our body and sense what is this first order reality? Yes, you can contact me. I'll flash the last slide, which has my contact. Um, Maybe before we end, I'll flash that. But I just want to check if there's any other um, questions or thoughts before we finished. All good? Then I want to type it in the chat. Okay, cool. Right. So I'm just going to flash the last slide. So I want to, before I go into the last slide, this is the second last slide, and I want to share this piece of artwork here, and this was done during one of the workshops. It's the art therapy workshop in which we draw with our body through somatic work, and this is one of the pieces that came out from through sensing, feeling, and then expressing it in charcoal and a very big canvas that the body can slide through and move through. So I just want to share that with you. And here is my contact. So my website is yogawithdaphne.com. My email is yogadaphne@gmail.com, and my IG is @yogadaphne. You can also find me on Facebook, Yoga with Daphne, or Yoga and Body Work with Daphne. I can't remember. But if you look for Facebook, let me just type it in. I forgot that. Okay, here. Oh, damn. Sorry. It doesn't. I don't know what's gone wrong. Let me just show that again. Sorry. I'm not very technologically literate. Can everyone see this slide? Yeah. Okay. So this is. In Singapore. Is it? Are you all in Singapore? No. Right. So yeah, I have been doing some online courses and stuff during the lockdown. But I have at the moment I have kind of I'm taking a break at the moment because my in-person work has been quite busy. So, but yeah, do keep in touch, and you can sign up for my mailing list, my newsletter, and then I will post updates on what I'm doing in terms of education as well and trainings. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks for doing this.
I hope you all enjoy your weekend, and please stay in touch. Please contact me if you have any questions or thoughts. This is just planting a little seed into this very, very interesting field of work. And the thing is that you might actually notice something might come to you, like an aha moment might come, one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week down, maybe 10 years down, I don't know. So, yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful weekend.